For many, this is a very sensitive topic because anytime somebody learns that they've been believing in something that isn't true, the very first thing they do is get angry and defensive, and they throw themselves into that wonderful world of denial. So I encourage you to set your emotions to the side and activate that exceptional brain of yours. What you're about to hear is an eye-opening breakdown of how your feelings are being used as instruments of control. Welcome to Facts Me TV, my friends. I'm Stephen Lancaster, and today I am pulling back that curtain on what I call the empathy dominion. You guys have probably heard me reference it throughout other episodes of this show, and it's kind of the way I describe what empathy actually is, and I just kind of call that description the empathy dominion. And I think you'll see why by the time I'm done describing it. I'm here to educate you on what empathy actually is, my friends, and more importantly, what it is not. Empathy isn't ancient, it isn't sacred, it isn't some eternal virtue passed down through the halls of human civilization. It is quite literally a 1909 psychological invention. Invented in 1909, a modern linguistic costume pretending to be timeless moral wisdom. That's it. Strip away the romanticized packaging and you discover something very unsettling. Empathy is simply the word control masquerading as kindness. On the most superficial level, the thin, brittle surface people parade around as virtue, empathy is defined as the ability to understand or feel what someone else is feeling. But that surface, my friends, is ice cold and very freaking paper thin, because buried inside that definition is a demand. Feel what I feel, carry what I carry. Surrender your emotional sovereignty for mine. We are told empathy is a noble emotion, a moral compass, a sign of a good person. But step back and really consider what it asks of you. Is it truly good that another person wants you to feel their pain? To suffer when they suffer? To absorb their anger, their sorrow, their confusion? What sane or decent human being expects that level of emotional servitude from a friend or a loved one? Empathizing with someone is nothing more than dressing up a lie in a silk robe. If my friend loses his wife and I say, I empathize, my friend, I am lying outright. I cannot feel what he feels. I cannot replicate the depth of that agony. And frankly, why would he want me to? Why would any rational person desire to drag another soul into identical suffering? That isn't compassion. It's self-indulgence disguised as emotional intimacy. It borders on narcissism. Now, sympathy, that I can extend with honesty and integrity. I can stand beside him, offer support, provide comfort, and remain anchored in my own emotional reality. But feeling his pain, absorbing his grief, for what purpose? Empathy becomes a moral leash the moment understand me quietly mutates into feel what I feel, think what I think, and modify your perspective on command. It is the soft-spoken architecture of emotional domination. Then consider the self-proclaimed empaths. People who brag about crying when you cry, hurting when you hurt, and absorbing every emotional tremor in the environment as if it makes them gifted, mystical, or spiritually elevated. But psychology already has a name for that phenomena. It's called emotional contagion. It isn't magic. It's not metaphysical. It is a psychological dysregulation that responds best to cognitive behavioral therapy, emotional boundary work, and nervous system regulation. There is zero scientific evidence that empaths exist and some supernatural archetype of heightened humanity. No test, no scan, no clinical standard validates the claim. Because proving someone is an empath would be as absurd as proving Uncle Ed is a werewolf. You cannot diagnose a fantasy. Emotional contagion, however, is real. And it is most common in individuals who are easily influenced, emotionally porous, or navigating chronic self-esteem instability. These individuals often become easy targets for manipulation because they lack the emotional boundaries necessary to resist eternal influence. Now, returning to real empathy, the manufactured concept people insist is moral currency. Here's the distilled truth. Empathy is a subtle, sophisticated form of emotional control. When someone asks you to empathize, they are asking you to momentarily extinguish your own emotional independence, your own reasoning, your own sovereignty in order to inhabit their emotional world. And while that may appear compassionate on the surface, it redirects your feelings, reshapes your thinking, and alters your reactions, often without your conscious awareness. That is the very definition of control. This is exactly why I choose sympathy over empathy every single time. Sympathy allows me to remain in control over my own emotional state, while still acknowledging another person's pain with honesty, stability, and respect. It allows connection without surrender. It honors both realities, mine and theirs, without blending them into some contaminated emotional mixture. Sympathy is compassion anchored in integrity. Empathy, however, demands compromise. And compromise, when imposed on your internal world, is simply a polite word for surrender. We're indoctrinated to believe empathy is always virtuous, the gold standard of emotional intelligence. But look closer. Empathy is often a Trojan horse for influence, persuasion, and conformity. Sympathy preserves boundaries. Empathy erases them. Sympathy supports, empathy subdues. Empathy is stepping into someone else's shoes so completely that you forgot your own. Sympathy is walking beside them, concerned, supportive, but still firmly standing in your own identity. Both are forms of connection, but only one keeps you grounded. And in today's climate, empathy has become a political weapon, a leftist tool. Feel like us, think like us, understand us. Bend yourself into our emotional worldview until your own logic, beliefs, and identity dissolve. It's a groupthink disguised as compassion. Emotional coercion camouflaged as virtue. True emotional intelligence isn't about feeling everything others feel. It's about managing your own boundaries so you don't get absorbed, redirected, or corrupted by someone else's chaos. True connection does not require emotional surrender. So the next time someone commands you to empathize, ask yourself, am I consciously stepping into their emotional world, or am I unconsciously forfeiting my own? Choose sympathy to stay balanced. Never let someone demand empathy as a means to control your beliefs, dilute your identity, or reshape your convictions. Because let's be honest, the left only cares about their emotions, their desires, their interpretations of reality. Using empathy as a weapon is simply another mechanism to force you into ideological conformity. Never surrender your beliefs to preserve someone else's feelings. That is all empathy ultimately leads to. Compromise of self. Sympathize, because when you empathize, you compromise. Care for others, of course. But care for yourself first. Preserve your integrity. Protect your autonomy. That is where real emotional connection lives. Empathy means to be controlled. Sympathy means you are in control. One removes your choice, one reinforces it. And as for me, I choose free will. I choose sovereignty. I choose a path that offers love, honesty, and genuine care without surrendering my identity in the process. Don't let anybody try to convince you that denying empathy is evil or heartless. Empathy as a concept is a psychological fabrication, not a moral obligation. It does not exist in the mystical, transcendent way people pretend it does. If you sympathize, if you show genuine care, if you offer honest emotional support to another human being, there is nothing evil, defective, or morally bankrupt about you. In fact, you are practicing the more authentic, stable, and truthful form of compassion. The individuals who damn those of us who refuse to subscribe to the empathy dominion are the very people furious that they can no longer control us. Their outrage isn't about morality, it's about lost leverage. They are angry because you refuse to surrender your emotional autonomy to their ideology. They are angry because you won't let them puppet string your feelings to match their own. Remember that. Guys, I'm Stephen Lancaster, and you have been watching Facts Me TV. This has been a segment I call The Empathy Dominion. Stay cool, everybody. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and leave your thoughts on empathy versus sympathy in the comments. Take care, my friends.